Hey everybody, George the Tech. Today I got with us Nolan Hennelly. He's got a unique use case of how he does audio production, but also the kind of audio production he does slash video. He is a YouTuber that is
Mhm.
also an audiobook narrator, or is it the other way around? So, Nolan, can you give us a little background as to how you've gotten into audio narration?
George the Tech.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I kinda took a bit of a journey into audio narration. It wasn't something that I ever really, thought about for myself. I've been acting for most of my life, went to, college for theater, went to get my master's for acting, and did all those kinds of things, and was always a big literature lover, but never really thought about voiceover at all because I always thought, "Well, I don't really do voices," was what I kind of thought as far as voiceover without, kind of understanding the whole world of voiceover. And so I just thought, "Well, I don't do voices, not for me." And then I graduated from a master's training program. I moved back up to New York, where I had been before, and then the pandemic hit. So right when I was getting back on my feet in the city, ready to audition and all that, there was nothing to do. And so I think, like a lot of actors in that time, I decided I would buy a tremendous amount of blankets and build a small fort in an apartment, and that's what I did. And so I did, I think a lot of actors were doing that at the time, but I just fell in love with it. And so I kept, improving on my blanket fort in an apartment in Brooklyn and started recording some old books, really just to teach myself how to do it, more so to, just to enjoy it, to enjoy acting, to stay sharp on my acting.
You already had a love for that kind of literature, huh?
Yeah, yeah. I always loved tough literature. I was always reading older books anyway. So I thought might as well give a couple a shot. And then it wasn't until a couple of months later that I decided, well, I'll throw them up on YouTube, thinking that nobody would be listening.
How did you get inspired to put it on YouTube in the first place?
You I don't even know. I think I was very shy about having recorded them, especially because so many actors were doing it at the time. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna try and do a little voiceover," and people were like, "Oh, yeah, yeah," you know? And so I think I just did it on a whim at one point. I had just started teaching a little bit. I had been offered a job at a university, and I was just teaching a little bit, and I think I just had them sitting there, and I was like, "Alright, well, I'm starting a new kind of career teaching a little bit. I might not get to act as much. These are just sitting here. Why don't I just put them out there?" And then it took a little while, but then they started to, get enough of an audience where I was encouraged to say, "Well, maybe there's some people that want this." And so, luckily, there has been.
What do you think is the success? I mean, YouTube is such a weird, bizarre machine. We always talk about the algorithm, and
Yeah.
I've been posting on YouTube, since like 2005, and I've been using it for personal. Now I've been using it for business. I've had a show on there for 13 years, and nothing has ever really gone viral. Nothing's
Yeah.
really ever picked up a lot of momentum, like kind of like, whoa, we got something here. What do you think you attribute to that having kind of built some momentum? I mean, you must have struck a chord and found something that had interest from viewers and listeners, but also obviously triggered a little bit of a YouTube algorithm. It was like, whoa, here's
Yeah.
something that people find interesting. Let's start, because what gets people in front of your show isn't as much organic. It's a lot more about YouTube suggesting it to somebody to
Mhm.
watch, right? What do you think it was?
I think it's a multifaceted thing, and I think I'm not, like, the only person doing this, so I would hate to come off as though, like, I've invented the wheel. I'm sure there are other people doing
No,
this that even have a larger following than I do,
sure, yeah.
and I think there's multiple veins of it as well. I knew there was an audience out there for people that wanted to fall asleep and do, like, sleepy time stories, and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wasn't what I was gonna do, but I knew that was out there. And that's kind of like reading a book in the most calming way possible, but the book kind of loses a lot of what the book wanted to do, you know? And, um, and then I knew there was also a lot of people bootlegging older recordings. that probably are also available on Audible. And I saw a lot of those channels that had all these bootleg recordings or LibriVox recordings. And I thought a lot of these classic books get assigned a lot to students. And I wonder
Mm.
if they wouldn't like to hear these books read by a voice that sounded a little bit more like them in a way.
Yeah, these novels are like repertoire, right? These are
Yeah.
all very famous, but also older
Hmm.
novels, right? That, are read by so many. And so that's how you kind of honed in on the kinds of
Hmm.
books that you're reading then, huh?
Yeah. And so I think there's that some kids are assigned, they're going to look for it. And then there's also literature lovers and people that want something to throw on that isn't, kind of noisy, that isn't politics or isn't like, a podcast with a lot of comedians, which can be awesome. But sometimes I think people just want something a little calmer. So I guess that's kind of part of what it is. And there's so many wonderful recordings of these books already, but a lot of them are recorded, or were recorded a long time ago with someone with a fabulous voice, probably a much better voice than mine, but they were probably a little bit in a rush. And so the focus is really on they probably were contractually obligated to get the book done as fast as, and I know I've been there. And so they don't get a chance to really build a relationship with the book. And and sometimes they do. Sometimes they're just miraculously talented and they do, and it's just a, brilliant piece of narration. And other times they have to rush, unfortunately. And I'm in a position very luckily where I can say, well, that chapter just doesn't feel right. And I can go back and do it again, sometimes a couple of times until I feel like I've captured it. And that's a huge luxury. I don't just have to be worried about, like the audio engineer getting exhausted because it's been another day and he hasn't gotten this right yet, or, whatever the case may be. And so that's very lucky.
Yeah. You get to really take your time with it. You get to explore the tempo or the whatever.
Mhm.
So you don't tend to re-record a sentence or a paragraph. You tend to re-record an entire chapter.
Well, I mean, I'll punch in and fix things if there's just 1 or 2
Yeah,
problems, but
right.
sometimes I'll listen back to the whole thing and I'll just go, I think I actually missed something here." And I'll realize that I haven't really caught the rhythm the writer was trying to find. And so then I'll go back and see if I can do a better job. Or sometimes I'll listen to a chapter and I just go, "You're trying too hard." You're trying too hard, or you had a bad day with diction, and I can hear myself working at it. And I think, you know what? Actually, let me do it again and let me see if I can do it without working so hard. And usually that ends up being a much better recording.
I'm thinking like, do less, do less,
Yeah,
do
it
less.
really is what it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Ah, it's so amazing. So, I mean, it's very clear to me that your training, your practice of theater is a huge part of this because
Mhm.
people think I have a good voice, I can read a book. It doesn't mean someone's going to want to sit and listen to you for how
Yeah.
long are these videos? 4,
Sometimes like
5,
10 hours
6.
long. Yeah.
I feel like I've been downplaying that you're an actor, because I kind of get
Mm.
caught up in the, wow, how'd you get the algorithm to play your videos? And what is the secret sauce?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's you have a voice quality that's soothing and enjoyable. You have a pace that people enjoy, and you have an
Mhm.
acting skill that makes the book enjoyable to listen to. You bring it to life, right?
Hopefully.
That's
Yeah,
yeah, it
hopefully.
seems to be working. And so the books you're choosing, I would imagine, because I saw your channel and I looked at the books in there, I imagine you're
Mhm.
choosing books consciously that are of, what are they? Creative Commons license, or what do they call it? Out of
Yeah, so
copyright, or
they're
what are these books?
absolutely, absolutely. So they're all books that are, out of copyright, or they're public domain, right?
Public domain,
Or
that's the word.
yeah, or they're, um or at least from what I can find, they're public domain. And it can be challenging because you'll see someone post, an audio recording of The Hobbit and they get like 60,000 subscribers and then it gets taken down and you're like, oh man, wouldn't I like 60,000 subscribers? But instead you're much better off not trying to do that sort of thing. And just recording the things that you're legally allowed to record. But those are the kinds of titles I pick, which lucky for me, I do love that kind of literature. And I do love literature from that time period. And there's so much, you go all the way back to Shakespeare or classic Greeks, and you come all the way up to Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald and all that kind of stuff. So I pick those kinds of books, and every once in a while, there'll be a surprising hit. And every once in a while, there's one where you're sure, well, teachers must be assigning this, and it's just radio silence. And you're like, oh, the red badge of courage isn't as popular as it used to be, you know?
I will fully admit that I don't like literature, and
Mhm.
I am not a fan of classic literature. I'm very technical. I have a very short attention span. It's very hard. But my gosh, if I had you and your YouTube channel when I was in middle and high school and I was assigned reading these books, and I had you to listen to and read along with, it would have
Yeah,
been a game changer. Because it would have engaged me in a whole different way, and I wouldn't have wanted to
yeah.
skim, rush through, kind of do the bare minimum to just get the
Mhm.
assignment done. It would have changed the game, man.
Yeah,
Do
and
you hear
that's the
from people
hope.
like that? Do you get comments from people, students,
Mhm.
and things
I
like
get
that?
a lot of comments from students that are like, "Thank God, right before my test, you're saving me," and all that, and I find it all very entertaining. And, at the beginning, I was like, "Well, wouldn't it be better if they were reading the books?" And I was like, "Of course it would be." And at the same time, that I was a professor for a little while, so I know there are
Oh,
students that
okay.
aren't doing the reading, and how much better for them to listen to something difficult from someone who's taking the time to try and understand it for them than to kinda just skip it and read a summary of it.
Yeah, or worse yet, skip it and just AI the hell out of the paper and just
Yeah.
pull
Oh,
internet
yeah.
and just completely like, yeah, it's like lesser of two evils, sort of.
Mhm,
But yeah, of course, you would love the student to engage the book, read the book, physically hold a book,
mhm,
do all those things that a book does to readers and how readers engage with their books. And I know people who that love to read.
mhm,
It's a unique thing. And, I have voice actor clients who are like, I might do an audiobook. And, I don't, and I'm not there to judge them, but I ask them things like, do you love reading? And then I ask them like, do you love reading in a box, in a closet, or in a
mhm.
closed? Like you have to try these things first. Do those things.
Yeah,
Get a book, sit down, record yourself for 2-3 hours. Do you enjoy that? Is that soothing, interesting, fun to you? Then you might be the right kind of person to do this.
mhm,
It's not for everybody, right?
yeah. And I think, a lot of times when I was, getting some of my acting training, there's so much of that, like, well, you do all this homework, you do all this analysis in advance and make all these decisions. And then I ended up finding another kind of path or kind of thought about acting, which was actually to try and be a kind of vessel or like a transparency for the author for the book. So on my best days, when I step into the booth, time flies because it's like you are kind of trying to just allow the book to work through you in a way without really trying to put too much of my own spin on it because that'll happen no matter what because I'm reading it. So I don't need to work on that part of it. And when you stop doing that, then you find, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I did 2 hours today. And it just kind of flew by because you're in a kind of flow state. And that's when I find that I really kind of discover the rhythm of the book. And that's when I learn something about the book because I'm kind of more passive and I can just kind of hear, new things in it in a way. And that makes it really exciting, even though the books are so old.
That's really interesting. Wow, it's quite a revelation. But I'll tell you, just hearing you speak now, and you're speaking obviously off script, extemporaneously.
Yeah.
I can tell that it's easy. You have an ease at doing that, and that's a huge deal. I've interviewed a lot of people,
Thanks.
especially recently, and even the best spoken or best actors can't necessarily make it through a 30-minute interview without
Mhm.
a tremendous amount of ums, uhs, I means, likes, and all those filler words and things, because
Yeah.
that's just how we string things together. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, I can hear through this interview how you would feel and sound narrating a book, and I'm like, oh, I see
Yeah.
it, like it's right there.
Yeah.
Like you're not acting, you're just you, but
Mhm.
you're a you with also theater training. So you
Mhm.
have this, how to deliver thoughts and sentences and all this stuff in a
Yeah.
way that connects. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
And, the flip side of that is I'm terrible with advertisements. Like, if I get a
mhm.
piece of copy, I'm like, "Oh, how do people do this?" It's so challenging. But anyway, you were about to say something. I don't wanna
You have a journey
interrupt.
ahead, and you'll learn. You'll crack the code, I'm sure, eventually, and then you'll
Yeah,
start
I'm
booking
sure one day.
commercials. Um, but so why did you come to me? What was it we did together? It had something to do with cleaning audio and getting clean audio, but
Yeah.
how did we make things better for your production?
It's twice now that I've actually come to you. It was actually the first time was really early in my journey, and I had you make an audio effects rack for me for Adobe
Audition?
Audition.
Adobe Audition,
Yeah,
right.
for Adobe Audition, and I just couldn't get the results that I wanted to get, and I all of a sudden realized I was so out of my depth, and all I wanted was something that was really clean and really simple, and I was looking for someone who wasn't gonna try and make me sound like a radio announcer.
Right.
And that was, one of the things when I listened to a lot of samples, when I would hear before and after, I would go, "That guy doesn't sound like himself anymore." And it was so important to me to sound like myself, just a cleaned up version of myself. And that was what we really got in the first effects rack. God knows what you did, but it accomplished it for me. And
So
then,
that was working for a while. That's
mhm,
something you implemented, and so that's what you've used on a lot of your YouTube videos
mhm.
now?
I think almost all of them. Yeah, almost all of them. And then recently, I switched to the interface I was using because the one that I had been using, I started getting some issues with it, and I thought I wanted a little bit more control and a little bit more. I wanted to level up a little bit, and so I went with the Apollo Twin X, and I leveled up too much, too fast, and realized I was again way out of my depth. And so that was when I called you back in, which was hugely helpful.
So we didn't do too much, right? We agree with processing. It was really more of a just getting you
Mhm,
oriented, making sure the
mhm.
because the Apollo is one of those things where it's clearly designed for an audience of musicians and
Yeah.
engineers, and not an audience of narrators, voice actors,
Mhm,
podcasters. So it really to get the most out of it. It needs to basically, I like to say, get rewired. So
mhm.
we basically rewired your Apollo and got it working smoothly for your production. So, and now has it been a painless thing? Is it just working?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. It was a little bit to get used to on the user end, but now I'm finding it much preferable to
Oh,
what I was using before, and that I'm, yeah, enjoying it much more now, which is great because I was about to return it. I was at that
yeah.
place
I
where I
mean,
was like,
I'm very cautious when people ask me what to get. I'm very cautious to
mhm,
recommend that, just because there is such a higher learning curve. There is such a
yeah,
sophisticated. Not only is the software sophisticated, the user interface of the actual unit is
mhm,
in some ways sophisticated, in other ways too simple. Like I would rather have four knobs than one knob, right? That's the way
yeah,
I would. But once you learn it, it's like anything else. You just learn it. It
mhm.
becomes muscle memory. It just becomes natural. So what is the primary thing other than just maybe sound quality or reliability or whatever? What is the primary thing that makes it something enjoyable to use? Why do you like it so much?
For me right now, it's just having the actual reading for the amount of gain and things like that, then having it be visualized for myself. Whereas on previous interfaces, it didn't even, there weren't always enough kind of metrics for exactly what I was dialing in. So when I would change something from day to day, I couldn't just write it down and have a kind of list for myself of, oh, you were doing, this kind of character work that day and it was much louder and those were the settings you used. And so it was always like a little bit of guesswork, and I really wanted to kind of take that guesswork back out of it, because I had been doing a lot of work for another company on top of doing my own YouTube work, and their stuff had a lot more kind of, it was a lot of like action scenes and young hero stuff, and so there was a lot of volume, and so
Big,
going back
yeah,
and
big
forth and so
dynamics.
much modulation. Yeah, and so I was like, I need to figure out a way to kind of have a couple of different settings, and so now I'm able to do that. So the switching back and forth is so much smoother. So yeah.
Let me ask you, when you do that kind of work, um, there's quite a few philosophies on how to record dynamic content, right?
Mm,
There's set the level very low so you know when you're clipping and let it rock, but there's also chunking it out into loud and soft chunks or whatever. So it
mhm.
sounds like what you're doing is chunking it out. Or are you recording loud stuff and then going back and recording quiet? What's your workflow when you're doing something like that? That's much more
You know, I
dynamic.
I think a lot of that was, just kind of getting it wrong and then figuring out for myself. I didn't have the terms, and so I think at the beginning, I really was chunking it out, and then finding that that was not actually giving me a smooth sound, and it was
No.
not, it didn't feel right. And then someone's yelling, but it feels like, okay, they're yelling, but they're 60 feet away. And so it started to feel very strange. And so what I did was I ended up going with a lower gain, and then, just really kind of learning how to modulate myself in a way that kept it consistent, which took a little bit of, was a little bit of a learning curve. So that's what I
Yeah.
ended up doing. But it still
Yep.
is definitely a different setting from when I'm doing my own audiobooks and I'm kind of close on the mic and I'm kind of, growling my
Mhm.
way through the 6th chapter of the Scarlet Letter or something, right? Very
Yeah.
different than like, some kind of
Yeah.
action story. Yeah.
'Cause, like, theater is like, let's say this is your full range of your volume, right? Theater is what? Up here,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
audiobooks,
Mhm.
it's, like, down here, right? You still have a dynamic range, right? Yeah, you
Mhm.
still have a range, but it's just shifted downward on the scale. So
Yeah.
you're still going from loud to soft. But if you're in an audiobook booth recording, this audiobooks are never recorded up here, right? It's
Mhm.
just even yelling is a constrained audiobook narrator yelling. It's a different,
Yeah.
it's not full on. That's where
Mhm.
it's totally different from video game
Yeah.
acting. Because in video game acting, they want it. They want all of it.
Mhm.
They want
Yeah.
reality. Video game is
Mhm.
reality. So they go really crazy with the levels, it's all over the
Yeah.
place.
And,
So
and I think when you're doing it in audiobooks, for any of those listening that might not have done it, like I hadn't done it, it just it's gonna be bad a couple times. You're gonna have to do it a couple times and listen back to it and hear it until it starts to sound, the way you want it to.
it's going to take a while.
Mhm. Yeah.
You got to be patient, right?
Yeah.
When you finish, so you're clearly producing everything yourself. Is that right?
Mhm.
Are you doing
Mhm.
100% of the? Okay.
Yeah. 100% of it.
So I've seen that you have some videos. I mean, a 10-hour YouTube video, that's no small feat to produce
Yeah.
a 10-hour video. How many hours in on a project like that? 100 hours? 50 hours?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really kept track. The
Don't.
video
Trust me.
aspect of it,
Don't keep
I'm
track.
not gonna yeah, all of a sudden then
You're
I'll
gonna
look
be
at the
like, "Wait a
revenue
minute,
and I'll
what
say,
am
I
I
don't know
doing?"
if that's,
Yeah.
yeah. Luckily I always have the solace of knowing, well, if I put a lot of effort into it, a lot of time into it, at least it's out there and it's a good thing. It's a net positive. Now some kid, can listen to this for a class if they need to, so it
And
ends up
it's
being worth it
evergreen
for me.
too because it's classic
Yeah.
literature. So you can listen to this
Mhm.
now in 5 years and 10 years, and if YouTube's
Yeah.
here in 30 years, it's relevant.
Yeah.
And the quality
Yeah.
is very good because you've put a lot of effort into getting
Thank you.
quality. And quality of the sound it is scientifically proven that it will make what you're doing, your performance, more
Mhm.
believable. When your quality is good, you will be believed. The comprehension of the listener will be improved, and the believability of what you're saying goes up when the sound is really
Mhm.
great. And that's definitely what you're achieving, man. It's
Yeah.
really great.
Thank you. I mean, I totally believe it, yeah. Thank you so much.
So just one or two more nuts and bolts, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, please.
It's not easy you have to have a pretty big amount of storage space. You need a pretty good, decent computer to work and export out a video that's one continuous 10-hour file.
Mhm.
What are you using on your end to do all that?
Not what I should be. I'm still using an older MacBook Pro, so when I eventually export the video, it takes forever, so that's one of those things where it's like a slowdown in my workflow. But before that, it's pretty easy because, I just create all the chapters of the audiobook and then put them all together in one file, and the video is really simple. Really, I just create one thumbnail, have a little bit of intro music and an intro logo, and then the video is just that thumbnail the whole time and then the audio underneath it. So once I've created that whole combined audio file, it's pretty much just dropping it in, and then the rendering it out takes a long time. And so does the uploading it takes a long time. But that's, I think, one of those things that I'll have to, change. I think my MacBook Pro is still in the Intel era, so it's on its last legs, but it's still getting the job done.
You can delay the cost of upgrading and stuff a little while by using more cloud-based production tools. And
Mhm.
one that I use, and I'm actually using right now, is Descript. And what's amazing about Descript is it runs completely in a web browser. It
Mhm.
also has a download, but it runs completely in a web browser. And so the computation stuff, the file exporting, you know,
Yeah.
it's all in the cloud. The server's doing it.
Hmm.
So it takes all the load off your MacBook Pro. And I've never produced anything 10 hours long into script. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming it'll be
Yeah.
fine. I just never tried. I've done hour plus videos, you know,
Hmm.
but it transcribes the whole thing. It'll generate summaries and YouTube descriptions with index points, and
Hmm.
it does all of that for you, like very, very quickly and easily. That just could be something that ups your production, you
Yeah.
know, at least your final product for
Yeah.
easier consumption, you know. So
And that's
something
always
to
I'm always
play
looking
with.
for a new way to decrease the time between me and putting out another book, you know? So anything I can do to make it, you
Oh,
know, a little bit smoother, a little bit faster, right? That's the game. And like if you gotta fall in love with that part of the game as much as any other part of this, you know, the voice acting or, you know, the narration, whatever it is, you kinda have to fall in love with the making of the content. So that's something I'll definitely look into.
it's worth an experimentation, and if you ever want me to hold your
Mhm.
hand through how I use Descript or set it up, you know, you
Oh,
let me
we
know.
will. Yeah,
At some point, we'll do
absolutely.
a webinar. We advertised a webinar. It was the wrong time of the year and the wrong
Mhm.
audience, but I locked away a Descript, how to use it, how to edit, how to do everything webinar. So one of these days,
That sounds good.
I'll get that
Mhm.
going.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I think you might actually really enjoy it, and it might speed up your production quite a lot.
Yeah.
So it might
Mhm.
be something cool to play with. And lastly, and then, so what software are you actually finishing your videos in? What are you editing with?
I've been using Adobe Rush because I haven't really needed
Oh yeah,
any, you know, editing capacity beyond that. You know, I have access to Premiere, but I haven't really needed to move over into doing that. Although I am, you know, looking forward to doing some videos that are more kind of a talking head talking about the book. Sort of, you know, I hung up my professor hat a little while ago, but a little bit more educational, you know, 10-minute videos about why I kind of love this book or whatever it is. And then I think I'm going to have to make the move over and go to a more
hmm
comprehensive editing software. But for now, Rush has been working for me.
I love Rush. I use it on my phone because it was one of the
Yeah.
first apps I found that could let me do edit vertical videos on my phone, and square videos, and it was less
Hmm.
crashy than iMovie, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And you know, it
Hmm.
just was better in so many ways. But I've never used it on the desktop, and I'm glad you mentioned it because it's something I want to remind people is use the software that works for you and your workflow. Don't use the thing that's the pro version because that's what pros
Hmm.
use. Doesn't mean you have to use Premiere. It doesn't mean you have to use Final Cut. You could use iMovie. You could use Rush. You could use CapCut or whatever app it is that you stumble on that works for you. Use it. Don't worry about
Yeah.
it. Somebody else thinking about, well, that doesn't sound very professional. Who the heck cares? You're the producer. You get to decide what tools you use. That's why we also love Twisted Wave for video. I mean, for audio. Very simple, very easy to learn, basic recording
Hmm.
software that gets people down the road, and also has video editing, which people don't know. But I can cut down a long video in Twisted Wave, and it's like editing a wave file. It's super easy
Yeah.
with. It's just crash edits. There's no, you know, there's no
Hmm.
crossfades. Oh, last thing.
Yeah.
Do you do just when you make edits, is it just simply a crash edit or do you
Yeah,
crossfade
simply
it or
yep.
any of that stuff?
Just very
Yeah.
simple crossfading, you know, on the video, just such simple stuff. And I think that's such good advice because especially when people are starting out creating or making anything, it can be so intimidating. And I started using Adobe Audition and was so intimidated. And then when I finished, you know, my first book or whatever, I was like, all right, I need to use the simplest video editor because I can't learn anything more right now. I've already maxed out everything that I can
Yeah.
learn this, you know, this month as far as tech is concerned. And so, take it slowly and you like you said, use the tech that you can, you know, that makes sense for you right now and you can always learn more later. Um, it's about getting this
Absolutely.
stuff out, you know.
That's absolutely true. And just a, you know, sage advice for everybody watching. If this is inspiring you, start creating your own content, start doing it, use what you have. Don't, I
Mhm.
will say start with something smaller, start with a shorter book, start with something that's even
Mm.
if it's a kid's youth novel or whatever it is short, you know, keep it on the shorter side, 2 to 4 hours, maybe tops. So it's not overly overwhelming and start
Mhm.
there and then work up to something much longer so that the size and scale of the project isn't too daunting at
Yeah.
first and then you get more comfortable with it, right?
Absolutely. And even on the bigger projects, it's only a chapter at a time. It's only a chapter at a time, and then they all stack up.
Well, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
I appreciate that you came to us for support when you needed it. And it's really nice to chat with you today.
it's been a pleasure being here, and I will be back. I'm sure.
Excellent. And again, if you guys need that kind of help, you can get sound checks. You can get one-on-one consulting with me and our team. You can get training. We have a tremendous library of learning content. Our webinar channel is full of videos of things to learn at your own pace and affordably. So definitely check that out. Thanks for listening. George the Tech out.